Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill, we got a lot to talk about for this USC team. Obviously, extremely not only disappointing, but just frustrating loss on the road against Minnesota. And for the USC fans who've been rocking with the fellas, again, y'all show a ton of support. We've talked a lot about the good that we've seen to start the 2024 season. This is going to be a lot of talk about the bad that we saw Saturday night against Minnesota. Want to really dive into this USC offense and talk about some problems that we're seeing for this USC team. Now, before we get into it, to the USC fans, let it fly in the comment section. I mean, I got a list of things that I want to talk about for this USC team. There are a lot of different places on this USC team that you can kind of point the finger at. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. If you just want to vent, let it fly. Again, appreciate all the support. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. The highs, the lows, Dale, the USC fans have rocked with the boys for a very long time. Appreciate you guys. Dale, without further ado, let's get into this offense. And you have to start on the offensive line, specifically at the offensive tackle spot. And we're going to talk about Miller Moss. We're going to talk about the offensive play calling. When you can't reliably protect the edges on the offensive line, it just limits what you can do on offense. And you look at, Elijah Page, Mason Murphy, at throwing Alani Noah on the inside, it's a problem. Every single play, at least one of those guys getting beat. And the problem is getting beat like clean, like creating some game-changing plays. Josh Henson, look, we don't get up here and call for coaches' jobs pretty routinely, but at the end of the day, you look at Josh Henson, I think it starts on the recruiting trail. You've brought in one blue chip offensive tackle the last two recruiting classes, but I think more importantly, it's the development. Like, you look at Jonah at center. He was a ready-made product when Josh Henson got there. You look at Emmanuel Pregnon, probably the two best players on this offensive line. Emmanuel Pregnon came in as a ready-made guard from Wyoming. Elijah Page, there is no reason that he should be having the struggles that he's having going into year two. Alani Noah, very little development. He looks like one of the more, and I hate to say this, but like poorly coached offensive linemen that you see. He doesn't look like he knows what he's going on. And then Mason Murphy obviously struggled last year, had a good game against LSU. We were kind of optimistic about where that could go, and it's been bad the last couple of weeks. Yeah, you want to get at the quarterback and you want to get at Lincoln Riley, but I think it starts on the offensive line in this conference. If you cannot pass protect, it's a problem, and it's been a huge problem for USC.
Because I don't know exactly what more you'd kind of want from it. I mean, you look, they're running the ball a fair amount. They ran the ball very successfully. I mean, there's times where you need quarterbacks to make plays and you need your passing game to work. And also, you have a stable of receivers, Jacoby Lane, Deuce. Like, those are guys who need to be playmakers. They need to be really involved. And that is what's so frustrating about the team.
That's what's most frustrating is you have two, I think, just freak shows on the boundary here who excel working vertically down the field, and you can't get them involved as much as you want to because you can't pass protect long enough for these wide receivers to run their longer developing routes down the football field. I mean, you are not really able to access what I think is the best part about this USC offense because pass protection has been such an issue. Dill, now the conversation is like, how do you fix it in this year? And this is something that we talked about in the offseason. I'm just going to mention it again. Like, do you kick Jonah back out to tackle? Like, we've seen Jonah, he's by far USC's best offensive tackle on this offensive line. Now, I get why he's playing center because that's where he best projects going to the NFL. But if you want your best offensive line, Dill, what I look at it right now, because you look at Tobias Raymond and say, all right, you saw some decent things from him against Michigan, but it wasn't great. I think there's a reason Tobias Raymond isn't coming in. Like, this USC staff sees these guys in practice. Like, if they thought Tobias Raymond, I think, could play at a high level, they'd put him in for either Page or Mason Murphy. They didn't. Do you kick Jonah back out to tackle? Because that's like the only possible answer that I see it getting any better. Because Minnesota, like, they got a decent pass rush. It certainly ain't going to be what it is against Penn State next week. Like, you have to figure out something because it's so hard to run an offense with how inconsistent this offensive line has been.
Yeah, at least if you have one side that you maybe have your questions about, you can maybe work around that. I mean, right now you have two major glaring questions. I'm a little surprised. I was surprised when Monheim got kicked down in the center last year, or at the start of the season, let's say, like just knowing what they had at tackle, knowing how much of a question not Elijah Page. I thought he was going to play a lot better. He's obviously not doing his thing.
So,
But Mason Murphy, you knew was going to be a question. In the kick Mohnheim down in the center when your tackle play was like looking the way it was looking, I thought it was weird in the first place. It certainly looks weird now.
and I'm also like surprised they didn't go to the transfer portal and get an offensive tackle. And like I get it's hard, but like you saw these guys all spring and all of last year. Like Mason Murphy wasn't good last year, and you saw him in the spring. I don't know if you saw better things in the spring, but it didn't even seem like USC was really trying to get an offensive tackle in the portal. So that was another thing that I think is relatively frustrating. We'll see how it, like, again, that's where it starts, in my opinion. Like, and we're going to get to some other things that I think USC fans are rightfully so frustrated with. But when you have an offensive line in the Big Ten Conference that looks like that, it's really hard to run an offense on a consistent level. Let's get into the play calling. One thing that's frustrating to me is that it's pretty clear. Like I ain't the brightest bulb in the shed here in terms of football. When I look at football, like it's pretty clear we got problems protecting the edges on the offensive line. Not really many chips, not really much help for these offensive tackles, which seems to be kind of an obvious potential solution. They're running the football. Like they ran the football exceptionally well. It's very clear this offensive line, as much as we just kind of got after them in pass protection, they can block it up in the run game significantly better. And I know it's a different, this is hard for Lincoln Riley, right? He is used to having one of the best passing attacks every single year. This might be a season where you have to lean into your run game a little bit more. You got two really good running backs. I was kind of frustrated that Quentin Joyner didn't get back out there. Like, yeah, I get he fumbled. This kid's been running the rock really, really well all season. I would have liked to seen him get back out on the field. Woody Marks is phenomenal. Do you think USC needs to run the football a little bit more the rest of the 2024 season? Because I certainly think they should.
And we just had this conversation. I don't know. I feel like they're running the ball a fair amount, honestly. Even those stats are, I feel like, a little bit misleading. I mean, there's times where you just have to throw it, given the situation, given the like. So your passing stats might be a little inflated in terms of the numbers, but I mean, they're running the ball a lot. I don't really know what else you can do.
Well, look at Minnesota, though. Minnesota threw the ball 19 times. They ran the ball 40 times. Like, there's a pathway for, and it's a, look, as Michigan fans, like, it was frustrating for us at times last year. Sometimes you feel like you're hitting your head against the wall. But if that's, I think that's clearly kind of leaning into where this offense is.
I think you need your wideouts are good. They need to get the
Yeah.
ball. Like Minnesota has one good wideout. In Jackson's good, but he's it. I mean, they don't have any other threats. I just don't see how you can take away the balance that USC is playing with. And I don't think it's skewed too hard to the run game because, again, I want guys like Zachariah Branch, Mekhi Lemon, Jacoby Lane to have the ball in their hands. I know.
Do we want to talk about Zachariah Branch?
I know he dropped that pass over the middle, and that's really not like you don't want to see it because you want to see him turn into a real wide receiver, not just like a gadget playmaking guy. But these guys do need the ball.
I mean, I see where you're coming from, and I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit more of the quick game. You know what I mean? Like, you can't pass protect, so let's continue to get the football out really, really quick. And that's something UCLA had a lot of success with against Penn State. So I'm interested to see if USC can do that next Saturday. We'll talk about that, obviously, later on this week. Yeah, Zachariah Branch has been a really big disappointment for me. Like, we kind of talked about, okay, he was like this electric gadget guy last year. Doesn't look as dynamic with the football in his hands, not making nearly enough people miss, not really running by people like we saw him do last year. And obviously, as a pass catcher, he's not doing the small things right. Like catching the football, obviously one, but I mean, blocking on the perimeter is not great. I don't think he's the cleanest route runner for how athletic and juiced up this kid is. It's tough because your best wide receivers are at their best working vertically down the field, and USC just can't hold up in pass protection to push the ball down the field consistently. Dill, you look at, this is the last conversation I want to have on the offense is this conversation between Miller and Jaden Maeva, and whether we should see more of Jaden. I think I disagree. I think Miller Moss has been really good. Now I'm looking back at these numbers from last night and say, like, he was under pressure over 50% of his snaps, and Minnesota only brought blitzes on 20%. Like, Minnesota didn't bring any. It's so hard to be a quarterback efficiently when they're only rushing 4 You're getting pressure all the time. Dill, now the conversation, I think Miller Moss has been good is despite an offensive line that's been very, very bad. The only kind of conversation that I think is worth having is, all right, we know this offensive line is struggling. We don't really see a pathway for it to get significantly better in 2024. Does Jaden Mayeva with a little bit more athleticism, the ability to be a little bit more dynamic outside of the pocket and extend plays, I can see that conversation, but I think Miller Moss has been too good to yank him off the field, personally.
His ability, again, I trust that he gets the ball out of his hands really, really quickly. I don't know that we've seen that from Maeva. And he was developed in a certain way at UNLV for sure.
Yes.
It's kind of how they like to play it, that rhythmic style of ball. But does he come in? Is he comfortable? Because I mean, you're throwing him into the fire. I mean, USC's offensive line is not doing these quarterbacks any favors. So again, like Miller Moss, what you're seeing is, I mean, he's frankly making it kind of work despite everything going on with that unit because he does get the ball out quickly. When he gets his shot, he's very dependable in hitting those plays down the field. I don't know. Like I know like people got to find something to blame.
Yeah,
Michigan
100%.
certainly in that same boat. Like, well, whose fault is it that the offense doesn't work? It's like USC's, I feel like, it's pretty clear. It's their offensive line. I don't know what else you can do when you have two tackles playing at the level that USC's tackles are playing.
Yeah, Miller Moss, when he was kept clean last night, 22 of 31 for $183. Like, what was really, really good when he was kept clean. It's frustrating for me, and the USC fans know, like, I'm kind of rocking with USC. Y'all show a ton of support. We love talking about this team. It's the offense is most frustrating to me because it's just one problem. Like, I think if you just had average pass protection in the Big Ten, doesn't need to be great, just needs to be average. I think this USC offense is really good. I think you got a really good run game. I think you have very good wide receivers. I think you have a good quarterback when he's protected, but we just can't keep him protected. And that, again, it's really hard to run an offense when an offensive line is struggling the way it does, especially in the Big Ten. On the defensive side of the football, probably the worst performance from this USC defense that we've seen throughout the first 5 football games. Linebacker play was that like Eric Gentry. We missed Eric Gentry in a really big way. The linebackers kind of felt like they played last year, like lost in the run fits, couldn't really get off blocks, and you saw Minnesota just kind of grind down this team. And I think there's 2 things that stood out. One, missed tackles. He had 15 of them. That is not winning recipe. Linebackers weren't getting off blocks, and when they were getting off blocks, they weren't fitting the run all that well. But I think another conversation is, look, I think guys like Clifton and Gavin Mayer and Kobe Pepe are playing their absolute tails off. It's really hard when you only have 3 or 4 guys on the inside that you can trust in it. This is not the last time or the first time we've seen, like, in the fourth quarter when these guys are getting into their 40th or 50th snaps of the football game, you kind of wear down a little bit. I feel like that's kind of what you saw in the fourth quarter here.
They're probably going to need to get these young guys rolling. Carlin Jones, Gita Abasari came in, played some decent snaps, especially on the pass rush. That was what stuck out to me. Again, do they look like they have the size exactly to play consistently down to down? Like, we'll see. Obviously, they're still coming along, but I'm kind of with you. At the end of the day, they probably need to get 1 or 2 more guys that they can fit into this rotation. Because, I mean, as much as I thought the linebackers, like, they weren't getting off blocks, I thought this was like the first game I really didn't think they were kept particularly clean. And part of that is because USC's defensive linemen, if Minnesota is going to get off their double teams as quickly as they were doing against USC, they need to get off blocks too. So again, I think this front 7, like, missing Gentry certainly didn't help, but also just like the defensive line needs a more deeper rotation.
Also, like, a difference maker. USC had 1 sack, 3 TFLs. Like, they didn't manufacture any negative plays. You didn't get Minnesota into those circumstances where they were in 3rd and long and they were on. Like, that's not where Minnesota wants to be. We all know that. And you just weren't able to get them into those situations. That a lot of different ways that you could kind of point the finger. And we'll obviously talk about this a lot more over the next couple of weeks. Yeah, disappointing. We're going to preview the Penn State game. That feels like the game where you're going to kind of decide where this USC season goes. We saw a lot of really good teams lose. Like, I'm not trying to be a sunshine pumper right now, right? But like the college football playoffs, it is a wide open scenario here. Like, Tennessee just lost to an Arkansas team. Alabama just lost to Vanderbilt. It was a kind of a funky Saturday. USC got. This Penn State game is massive. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.